With the countdown to possibly another shutdown, this time in two parts, we bring in the Wall Street Journal's Katy Stech Ferek. Katy, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. This is so fun.
You've been covering Congress for how long? This is a relatively new beat for you, although you've been with the Journal for a while.
Yeah. I've been with the Journal for like a dozen years, but I've only been covering Congress for like the last year or so. So still in learning mode, and still kind of figuring out how crises come and go and how they work themselves out. Still a student of that.
Well, at least you got some training wheels last year when not only was there a protracted speaker ascension, there was a speaker removal, there was another speaker ascension that took plenty of time. So I feel like you might have packed a decade's worth of congressional experience into about 12 months.
We did indeed. Master of disaster skills are like ahead right now.
Well, let's take a look at what Congress has facing them right now. Lay out for folks who are not plugged in this two-pronged goalpost for funding the government.
Right. Yeah, we're in that weird period where there's a phrase that I say and there's a phrase that I hear said periodically. It's like rears its ugly head. It's like the phrase like, I don't see how this happens, or I don't see how this resolves, or I don't see how we get there. And
yes,
we always get there, but like we're in that weird fun period where like we have like 10 days until like the first of two shutdown deadlines hits, and we like don't even have the like real legislative vehicle. Like, we don't really have like a wait. So what are we doing about it? Like,
yes,
It's not even like a thing to be like, hey, are you voting for this? Or are you not voting for this? Like, we don't even know the approach by which one avoids a partial shutdown after January 19th. So like,
yes,
it's a special time. We do, so the Congress is trying to figure out how much money to budget its federal agencies and have given themselves a couple extensions. This is like the funding level that should have started October 1st, but we're living off of two extensions. And the first of two deadlines for federal agencies, like funding runs out next Friday night, midnight, for a handful of agencies, and 2 weeks later, DOD and the other agencies also lose funding. If we can't figure out what kind of additional extension we'll get, or whether like Congress can push through an agreement on what that budget number is. And so we're kind of waiting to see. There was some momentum this weekend. Congress, like congressional leaders, finally announced and agreed upon like the overall budget numbers, so that like we have that top line number, and so now all the different 12 bills that sort of split up how the money goes. Now the folks who are working on those different bills at least know what numbers they're working with.
Yeah.
But we don't really know how those are going to advance when it comes to passing those 12 individual bills. Like the House has done 7. The Senate has done 3, the 5 that remain unpassed. And if we were to go the traditional route of passing all the little 12 bills and then reconciling towards the end,
which has not happened in a while, because normally they wind up getting rolled into a big omnibus, right?
Omnibus, exactly.
Yeah.
But if we were to do the traditional approach, which, like, I mean, House Republicans were like, especially when Johnson came in, they're like, hey, we want to do this. We want to cut spending. We don't want to get jammed with this big bill where we just have to sign off at Christmas. We want to be able to work these individual spending bills. This approach hasn't happened in like a decade. But so to go back to the 5 unpassed House bills, where there are these like, the 5 that remain unpassed have like major issues with them. There's like the DOT bill. The New York moderates are like, hey, don't cut Amtrak funding as much as you want to. And other like conservatives are like, let's slash railroad grants for Amtrak. There's a bunch of abortion-related stuff in there, like the DOJ bill would prevent DC from kind of implementing a law that would prevent employers from discriminating against an employee based on their reproductive preferences, like their decision to have an abortion.
Because the federal law would have dominion over DC.
It's like these policy riders on them, like these little Christmas tree ornaments that would go through with it. And there's like some real hesitation right now among House Republican moderates about kind of agreeing to that. And we've seen moderates, when Congress, the 118th began last year, we've seen moderates, it appears that they were sort of told, hey, kind of go along with like the more extreme side of things, the ultra conservative side of things. Like, it'll be fine. What ultimately passes won't be as extreme as what you want. But towards the end of the year, and after the speaker fight, I think we really started to see moderates speak up a little bit and be like, I'm not just going to go along with this. Like, I'm going to raise my hand and say I'm not super thrilled. So all this like leads to kind of a scenario in which like Speaker Johnson now has, if you think of his group of Republicans that he has to govern, he has like water leaking out from multiple parts of the dam. Yeah. And it's not, not only do we like not know what's going to happen to like try to keep the government open, like we're also saying that phrase, I just don't see how, related to Johnson kind of staying in his job. Already there's just like questions, we're asking questions all the time, like, is there someone that is going to be so unhappy with how he's navigating and relying on Democratic votes or passing bills on suspension, which relies on Democratic votes? Is that going to, like, is someone going to raise their hand and like Matt Gaetz it up and be like, hey, you're out, and have another speaker fight? So,
well, let me ask this, because the reality of those 5 bills getting negotiated and passed separately is non-existent. So either there's going to have to be another extension, or there will have to be some kind of omnibus. We have already seen the House Freedom Caucus be up in arms over that top line deal that came out over the weekend, saying, absolutely not. This is a giveaway. This is exactly the thing that we booted Kevin McCarthy for, because, by the way, it was exactly the thing that they booted Kevin McCarthy for. These numbers were almost exactly in line with the deal that he had. So, and just real quick for listeners, as of right now, I believe that Steve Scalise is doing cancer
numbers.
treatment. So
God,
the number
math.
is they have one? Is it one person majority?
We're at two until Johnson leaves. Math important. We fixate on it. To be clear, like, someone can get COVID and like not show up. Like, you have to be here. So like, while it's always important to note the slim majority, of course, like, someone can like miss an airplane, and like the numbers all like, whenever there's a critical vote, like, we always look at the votes before and be like, okay, who's actually here? So exactly, of course it matters, like, that moment.
Check their Facebook, see where their last post was.
Like, tonight, like, House lawmakers get back and they're having like just like their quorum call vote to be like, all right, is everybody here before like the show gets started tomorrow? And but to your point, yes, slim majority. It's got even slimmer on January 1st with McCarthy out. Bill Johnson is going to go be a college president after the 21st, or I think as of the 21st. Dems lose somebody beginning of February. They lose Brian Higgins in upstate New York. So the math is always, and then there's the Santos race on, or the race to replace Santos in mid-February, I think it's the 13th. And so like the numbers like change incrementally, and normally these are things we would not pay attention to, but because of this narrow majority and the inability of Johnson to lose like any large blocks of support, including House Freedom Caucus folks, on anything, it leaves Johnson with little option other than to rely on Democrats to push things forward, which is what he's done before on getting like these 2 extensions that we're at right now, or rather on the one extension that he got, like, relied on Democratic votes. So
if you were just strictly looking at the vibes of the Republican caucus on exactly what they got from that speaker fight, like, how would you describe, worth it? Even the folks that were the most dialed in about it, do they think that it was worth it? They got a lot out of it, a little out of it, nothing out of it?
It depends on who you ask, man. Like, there are some folks that are so upset. We're so upset on McCarthy's behalf, and so we're like, why did we do this? Initially there was some thought at the very end about like some satisfaction from ultra conservatives with the process. Like, hey, Johnson, it does appear to be more conservative than McCarthy on a couple of different positions. And McCarthy just came in with, like, Johnson didn't have, like, kind of baggage when he came in. Like, he was
Sure.
kind of unknown. Senator, like, had to Google him,
We joked on this show that Johnson, now Speaker Johnson, was the only person in the House without 5 enemies. He's since gained them, but at the moment, he was the only one without 5.
There was the honeymoon period, and we're always like, where was the honeymoon? I think it was Dusty Johnson was like, it'll be a couple of weeks before we get stabby again. Back then. Yeah. So but like so I do think there was some sense that, like, he didn't come with the Kevin McCarthy, like, to the extent that Kevin McCarthy did make private promises to folks and just say yes to everybody. And then all of a sudden one day it was like, people said, hey, you didn't fulfill that promise to me. And that, led to his ousting. And Johnson doesn't have the same baggage. Of course, we do see the incentive to not oust him because there is a huge question of, like, well, who would replace him? Who else would we get? There were so many rounds where folks raised their hand for a speaker. There were so many nominations, so many different people that raised their hand, so many a bunch of people who didn't raise their hand because they also recognized, if they're trying to be smart politically, like Elise Stefanik or someone else, like, people who didn't raise their hand because they're like, well, they aspire to GOP leadership, but, like, now is not the time.
No.
Who would replace them? So I think there's a kind of like a natural incentive not to go through that process again. And we are just going to have to see, how long he can sort of really uncomfortably navigate all these forces.
So this moment felt like a bit of a tipping point where the deal comes back and it's the same McCarthy numbers that some of the quotes that were coming out of the House Freedom Caucus were more
Total
vociferous
failure
than they had been before. This was, there was the anger had been peaked.
Totally. I feel like Chip Roy is asked every, like, 3 hours on the hour, like, are you gonna oust Johnson? It's like, now? How about now? And so you can kind of, like, read into, listen, like, we don't see, like, a motion to vacate, like, today.
No.
But of course we see growing discontent, the discontent we anticipated, like, from the moment that Johnson stepped into the position. We see it growing, and who knows what that moment will be that there's a pivot and we find ourselves in, like, another place of Republicans kind of killing their leader, just like as they do.
That was the thing that I think really, really defined last year was just the lack of the institutional leadership, with Pelosi gone from the leadership on the Democrats. The Republicans, obviously Kevin McCarthy was not going to be able to fill in for any kind of unifying role, even if he tried to make as many deals as he could to get the job in and of itself. But both with the speaker fight and the Democrats voting against McCarthy and, of course, the Matt Gaetz-led revolution to trigger the motion to vacate to begin with, it just felt like there was no adult in the room that was going to walk in and say, all right, knock it off. Everybody yell and scream on cable, but we need to get our job done. Is there anything close to that emerging from somebody that is looking at this every single day?
My God, no. I don't think there's any good approach. What is it? Winning is easy, governing is harder. Phrase. And also, I think everyone's realizing, like, it's so much easier to be in the minority. Like, when you're just like this unified, like, less paid attention to group. Easy to do that. No, I don't think that there is any sort of unifying figure. I don't think there's anybody that everyone can look to as like, oh, if only that person was in charge. This is like a really divergent group of Republicans. There are so many different ways and demand, policy priorities. Look at the voters. Look at the divergent interests in the different ways that people who identify themselves as Republicans, like all the different hats that they can wear. So, they send who represents them, and that gives you a really broad spectrum of humans here that have different interests in trying to represent their people. So
I guess it is a sign of the times that there's nobody at the center that can wrangle all of these tribes. All of these tribes are going to be more and more emboldened to fight for their core constituencies, and that's it. If someone's mad, good. It means it's working.
Yeah. Of course. Of course, there are personalities that are operating, distant to their voters, but these are a reflection of who's out there? Like,
Yeah.
And they all come here, and then they all get in a room. There were so many during the speaker fight. There were so many late night like dinners, and I think we called them struggle sessions, or people were calling them struggle sessions, where like, it was like kind of like is it a millennial approach? Like the idea, like, let's just all get in a room and talk together.
Sure.
And, like, work it out, and like feelings were raw. There were times when, we all thought we'd be working through the weekend, that they'd be like working through the weekend to try to find somebody. And like they sent everyone home because tensions were just so high. I mean, and then sometimes like you'd like one of these struggle sessions would break, and like people would come out like, of these dinner rooms, or like the big room where they served dinner or pizza or barbecue, whatever it was. Some people that were just like, oh, that was a waste of my time. Like, I got nowhere with that. And there were other people that were like, gosh, that was really helpful. I really enjoyed listening to the thoughtfulness of this person. And I, really appreciate that we're all trying to come together and get to, like, so like, you can't even have like one unstructured meeting with this group. And like, everyone comes out saying, like, agreeing on like the level of usefulness of the meeting and what the moment needed. So it's just hard. It's just really hard. So.
Well, amongst that power base of unity comes not one but two impeachments. One that has already been initiated into President Biden, another that is in the offing this week against Alejandro Mayorkas. What are the statuses of those? Let's start with the Biden one, and then we'll get to the Mayorkas one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Mayorkas is seen as like kind of like the easier, more basic issue to move forward on, and so I think that's why kind of going. The border has like become an issue where, I mean, we've seen, I feel like a year ago, there wasn't this consensus that something needed to be done on the border. Like the numbers just weren't attractive. We didn't see the presence of migrants in cities that we're seeing now. And definitely over the last couple of months, we've heard a lot more concern from Democrats, of course, and from everybody. There's just more consensus that something needs to be done. And so Mayorkas, who, like, to be clear, was like on thin ice from the moment that Biden became president, and like, I think was always kind of like a target, just by nature of his position, is now, facing scrutiny and kind of some of the first, we're expecting first steps on that later this week with the hearing, and who knows what will happen after that. Yeah,
I think it's a combination of the cities getting touched by it, the New Yorks and the Bostons and the Chicagos, DC, of course. And then also just how telegenic some of the stuff, like when you see a bunch of Chinese dudes in like polos with roller bags, like they're going to the airport, you're like, all right, something's different. This is not the traditional, I'm fleeing a death squad in my local country. This is something else is going on here that needs to be understood.
Right. So there's a clear sense of that, and that's why, I mean, separately we have these negotiations in the Senate on that, talk about things that like we just don't know what's happening with back in the I just don't see how category. But that's another separate issue.
That'll be after we figure out how to not shut down the country twice when we're seemingly unable to do it once. But let's get to the go ahead. Sorry.
And to your point on the Biden impeachment too. I mean, this was something that Johnson promised to move forward on, but there is also a sense like, how do you fit all this in? What role does that play in when there's all these other demands that you're talking about? Like, how much time and energy do you dedicate to a Biden impeachment and to the investigation there when there's lots of other issues? And so that's something that we talk about a lot here.
Well, the one thing that is going to be for sure about it is that it's going to be loud. Obviously, you can't quietly attempt to impeach the president, but it's even more so when a key figure in this, Hunter Biden, who obviously is the linchpin of all of it, seems to be going on offense, deciding to come to the Capitol Hill but not testify behind the scenes, to instead give a press conference. Outside in the parking lot.
I walked into the Senate press gallery, and like one of the press gallery people were like, Hunter Biden's outside, and I was like, I'll be right back.
Like, the Hunter Biden
sort of ran out. Yeah, like that guy. Okay. We just like ran outside. Like the space was reserved already by by another lawmaker, and that was like part of the whole. It was a weird day. It's weird. I mean, every day's a weird day here.
I mean, I feel like you're only going to have more and more weird days going forward, and part of that, and this is where we can begin to wrap things up, is the fact that this is an election year. Obviously, in the House, that happens very often. You're never really too far away from election day, but you've got a lot of people that are not seeking their seats
exodus.
again. Yeah. So how has election day settled in so far?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, we always have House elections, but I mean, the suspense with which we are watching this race, I mean, given the tight margins and given just how competitive things are and given the exodus, and also just given like the fact that we don't know how the presidential race will affect like down ballot stuff, like, you know, with Biden's popularity and Trump's popularity, like we still don't know. I was talking to David Wasserman at a Cook Report, and he has said that we are in a moment where this is one of the most suspenseful House races already for him. Like he just doesn't know what's going to happen what's going to happen, and it's going to be like every race matters, and we're looking at things that we like typically never looked at to see. Looking at redistricting fights, like can a judge make a ruling in time to like steer one or two seats? Like you never had to look at redistricting to be like, hey, what's going to happen this fall? I mean, everything matters. I mean, to your broader point of what does it do for legislation and like progress? I mean, a great example of that is like the border negotiations that are happening right now. I mean, nobody wants to take a tough vote. You know, of course, on one hand, you could like, you know, the optimist would be like, oh, well, doesn't everyone want to like resolve the border crisis and like go home and be like, hey guys, look what we fixed, and like everyone, like that's not how this works typically. I mean, prove me wrong, but like you know, no one wants to take a hard vote. No one wants to give Biden a win right now. Like if you're a Republican, no one wants to give Biden a win. And I just, you know, given the number of times, you know, the last time we had like major immigration reform in like late 80s, mid 80s. Yeah. I mean, bits and pieces, you know, here and there, but we've had like really high profile examples of like really well-intentioned negotiations totally fail. And to think that we are now in an election year and, you know, senators have said the last day or since they've gotten back that they're open to seeing what these Senate negotiators are coming up with in terms of new rules. You know, they're all going to read it. Yep. But there's just so many indications that it's dead on arrival in the House because it's not going to be as extreme as what they want. House progressives are like, guys, like they feel really left out in the process, and they have no appetite for. Well, not they don't have any appetite. They've always been open for business on changing laws and having smart immigration reform. This isn't how a lot of these elements is not how they would have seen it. They would prefer to see it. So, I mean, there's just so many indications that, like, we just don't have in any environment. We don't have the appetite to reform the immigration system, and certainly not now. So,
and this was all began because the White House believed that immigration could be a sweetener. That would be it would make Ukraine funding that would be the spoonful of sugar that would help the medicine go down because the House Republicans don't want Ukraine aid, or at least the level of Ukraine aid that the White House wants. And now they've found, oh wait, it turns out immigration may be the hardest of these to move forward on because the Democrats are also super upset about it, including in the Senate and the House.
Totally. We saw this earlier last year when support for Ukraine started to like really kind of drop off, and there was this idea like, well, what if we combine it with Israel aid? What if we combine it with like Taiwan aid? Like, what if we make it a big old thing, and then like it has something for everybody? I could totally see like back when like we didn't know what was going to happen with support. Like I can see that mentality. It makes sense. Like at the time, somebody was floating that idea to us, and I was like,
exactly.
Yeah, they throw a couple more things in there, and like maybe everyone will find the thing that they like, and it will pass. And like, practically, we're seeing that there are some challenges to that approach.
Well, and that's I believe in one of the newsletters, the morning newsletters, this morning, it was a quote from I think Senator Murphy saying, like, oh, well, who would have thought that this is the best place to negotiate immigration reform? And it's like, The White House. The White House thought it was 3-4 months ago that was the. It's like, oh, we'll just slip in a little bit of border stuff. We'll throw a little bit of aid for the blue cities. Ding, ding, ding. Sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle.
For everybody.
There we go. And Zelensky gets a check. No, it turns out it is going to be a fight like everything in Congress, but we are lucky that we have people like Katy Stech Ferek there covering it. You can read her work in the Wall Street Journal. Where else can people follow you?
The Wall Street Journal.
That's it? You don't have any socials?
I need to tweet more.
No, you don't. You don't. No, that's a good answer. That's a smart answer. I've never been more excited that you have cut any and all social media activity out of your life. You have enough on your plate.
No. To be clear, and to be clear, I monitor the social media. It's not. The Wall Street Journal is the best place to pay for and read my work.
There we go. Exactly. And that's what you should do. Head on over to the Journal now. Katy, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Justin.